So, funny story for you. Did you know that the majority of the builds that I play tend to be Void builds? And in fact, when I heard that Void 3.0 was coming, I was actually kind of confused because I'm like, why? They're good. They're really strong. I don't understand why we want to buff these over some of the other subclasses in the game that personally I don't find that enjoyable. Well, yeah, Void is kind of freaking strong now. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to bring to you some of the builds that I've used. You've seen these in other videos. I promise you this is not going to be necessarily anything new if you've been on the channel before. But that being said, the stuff that we've been given is so freaking strong, and the synergies that we can build in, just that Bungie has baked into it, is mind-boggling. It is quite good. We're also going to talk about the Osteoporosis, the Osteo Striga. Towards the end of the video, I'm going to give you my thoughts on it, as well as some cursory glances at some builds that we're going to try to make with it, possibly going into the future. Let's get rolling, starting off with, you know it, you love it, the Warlock. Besides the loss of my melee, Warlocks have pretty much gotten a straight linear buff, and I've asked Twitter as well what they thought was the strongest of the subclasses, and it turns out that Warlock seems to be the winner all around. It seems like both in PvP and PvE, Warlock is the way to go, and I completely understand why. The three aspects that they have are all each individually quite strong. Ironically, I think that the one that is probably the weakest for PvP is the overcharged grenades, because it's pretty similar to what we already had, and that was, for all intents and purposes, pretty balanced. So with all this, the best that we can do with it is just to give it some increased damage, so when you actually, tag somebody with it, they become vulnerable, but the vulnerability isn't that much, at least not in PvP, so it's all right. More for something if you're trying to kill a target outright with something like a scatter grenade. And handheld supernova does feel like it can sometimes one-shot things. I had a few times where it was just outright killing people, and other times where it would just gently push them away and frustrate me. The big thing here is the Child of the Old Gods, or Void Buddy for short. This new aspect is great at area control, and being that it's basically free, as soon as you slap down your rift, you have this little Void Buddy that'll follow you around for a little bit and then go give the target the good suck once you start shooting. Yeah, it's really good. This can give you energy back for your abilities or health back depending on what type of rift you're running, and I'm probably going to be running this over the handheld supernova thing that I used to do. I used to run handheld supernova all the time. It was one of my favorite abilities, even when it was nerfed, at least until recently. But yeah, I'm probably going to change that back. I think that the Child of the Old Gods is the way to go, and I'm willing to bet many of you will agree. Run this on Astrocyte Burst with the Mida and a slug shotgun. This slug shotgun is probably the best shotgun in the game right now, maybe except for that new Hawkeye shotgun that everyone's talking about. You can take a look at my full build here. You'll see all the aspects and fragments that I'm running with this thing, so you can get an idea. Feel free to take a look at that. Let's roll on into Hunter. Before we get to this next build, if you're enjoying this so far, make sure that you subscribe. If you don't, I will rob your house of all your cheese. I will take it all. This is not a joke. I will show up with a bag. In my opinion, I think Hunters got out with the biggest and most impactful of buffs. I think that their abilities to basically stay permanently invisible is a little bit terrifying, and this build absolutely takes advantage of it. This build literally has not changed other than the fact that it now can go even more invisible and cause even more shenanigans to occur for your enemy team. If you're not familiar with the Kingsfang build, this runs a quick access sling bow with Harmony. I'm hoping to hopefully one day get a Void bow with Harmony because of the changes to the Charge with Light stuff, which, yeah, we did have to make a sacrifice on this one to get rid of our bow targeting for the kinetic orb generation, which I think would probably be something I do for 6s, but not for 3s, but I digress. Run this with the Rat King to quick swap from your bow into your Rat King, and fun fact, the Rat King got a very subtle change where the invisibility that you get is actually void invisibility. It's not just generic invisibility, so all of the benefits that you get from your subclass or your aspects or your fragments apply to the Rat King. If that doesn't tickle your fancy a little bit, I don't know what will. This build is great at handling almost any situation. The only thing you're really gonna struggle with is if you are over greedy and over aggressive in close quarters, you will find yourself getting shotgunned pretty frequently. Space it out a little bit though, and you'll be just fine. As for everything else, yeah, you can basically stay permanently invisible with the new Void Shatter Dive, as well as the stuff that we already had, which is the Vanishing Step. Vanishing Step is much better now. It actually moves you a little bit further and a little bit faster, and it lasts a little bit longer, it feels like. I'm running this on the Graviton Forfeit for even increased further invisibility with this. And by the way, if you are running the Vanish and Smoke aspect, which is the Void Shatter Dive, typically speaking, you're not going to want to void shatter dive. You're going to want to throw the smoke at the ground. The reason being is that you'll be able to ping the enemy's radar once you do, because it just invises you as soon as it hits the ground. The only thing that you'd want to do to actually proc the void overshield is if you're trying to make sure that the enemy does not know you're coming and you're already invisible, right? Otherwise, you might as well just set that down there so your targets think that you're there when you're not, because that adds even more confusion to the enemy. I can already see players discussing them wanting to nerf invisibility, and I completely understand why. I'm a little frustrated that Keen Scout was kind of changed where now you have to crouch in order to get it. I did enjoy my increased sprint speed as well as my enhanced radar. I'm hoping it gets a slight change back to the way it was, but I know the other subclasses get access to it, so I don't know. But all in all, yeah, this is really strong. Give it a shot if you love invisibility and you want to frustrate your target even more, or maybe find some hate mail. All right, this last one, I have saved this one here, this void build for the very end because it's kind of toxic. It's a little outside of character for me, and this is running the Lorentz Driver, so you already know this is going to be good. This has yet to see any serious nerfs. In fact, with the void changes, this probably is going to get a buff, and that's kind of what you're seeing in the background here. The Lorentz Driver did get a nerf where it'll take twice the amount of flinch, but that doesn't mean that the rest of the weapon and all of the stuff that you can build around it isn't still absolutely crazy. What this is trying to do is this is trying to maintain a damage bonus or a void overshield permanently, and it is very easy to do so. You can see my mods here on screen for what I'm trying to do to set up on this. So I'm able to get my charged lights and hold on to them through the rest of the game, and if I'm able to get 3 kills on targets who are marked from the Lorentz Driver, then I will be able to get even more damage for even longer. So, you know, there's that. That's fine, this is fine. As for how I'm able to constantly have these void overshields, well, if you aren't familiar, the Aeon exotics got a change a little while ago, and they actually are pretty good in PvP. What you can do with them is if you put on the Sect of Vigor, which allows you to get any class ability back whenever an ally dies, that class ability reach, like how long a target has to be, like how far away they have to be from you in order for it to trigger, is all of your team. It doesn't matter where they are, if it has line of sight, it does not matter. You will just randomly get the class ability sometimes. You'll just get it, just because somebody way across the other side of the map died. So yeah, you can effectively maintain 100% permanent uptime. In fact, you might see in here that I had a moment where I was able to actually get this to get 2 barricades down at the same time. So if you want to be really frustrating to your opponents, yeah, this is a pretty good way to do it. I'm combining this with a Harmony 180 hand cannon. Once Harmony is procced, I'm able to 3 taps to the head, but you can pretty much run whatever you want here. Really, the main bread and butter of this is the Lorentz Driver, and if I was playing a little bit better here, you could see this being even more disgusting. But yeah, this build is so damn strong. But let's talk about the Osteoporosis. The Osteo Striga is a new 600 RPM kinetic SMG. I had some pretty high hopes for it, like above everything else. Like I think over everybody else in the community, I really wanted this thing to be good in PvP. I love when we get a new exotic, especially in the primary slot, that, or you know, primary ammo, that shakes up the game, that allows us to create new and exciting builds. The Osteo Striga is good, but my hesitations with it is that I don't think it's going to be able to compete long term. In PvE, that is a whole nother story. PvE, this thing is fantastic. I've been running this with the Worm God Caress with the Void Captain America shield, and I'm able to get like just stupid amounts of melee damage off of one shield throw. That's a whole separate discussion for another time, but in PvP, I'm whelmed. I'm very whelmed. The big thing I'm finding with it is that the projectile speed really does open up a lot of engagements to both be advantageous to you and disadvantageous to you. The big thing here being that you aren't really able to control when your target takes damage. And that might be weird because like you have a gun, of course you can control what time your target takes damage, but not really, because there's a delay between you actually firing and the target taking that damage. There's gonna be a lot of times where you feel like you should be damaging that target and you just don't because they're fast enough to get out of the way. If you want a comparison, if you've ever played Apex Legends, the Osteo Striga really feels exactly like Apex Legends guns. There's a little bit of travel time before it actually reaches a target, so it causes these weird moments where like you aren't really sure if you're on target or not, or if you need to lead the target a little bit more. The difference is obviously this thing has a little bit of tracking. My first experiments with it are to run it with the new Osmiomancy Warlock gloves, just to see if I can get some freezes with the Whisper of Rending, punch a bunch of damage into the target's head, poison them and anything nearby, or the Lion Ramparts is what you might be seeing in the background here a little bit, to try to fly around and shoot targets, because I don't have to be super accurate from the hip. That is one thing that it has going for it. But in both cases, I'm very whelmed, very whelmed. I wish glaives were just a little bit better in PvP. I've talked about this in a previous video that seemed to ruffle a little bit of feathers, but people have also told me that Bungie is planning on allowing the glaives to trigger more exotic interactions, which is fantastic. It's exactly what they need, because they feel like they're so close, but being close in this meta right now with how powerful shotguns, fusions, SMGs are, it's not going to be good enough, right? You got to be at least able to keep up with those big boys. The weapons are hella fun though. Of course, leave a like and subscribe. Bless your faces, deuces.